So hello, my problem with ES3 is very easy explained. You see here a simple scene file, and you can see basically a sphere and the shadow, and I could create now different materials and just shade and light it as I wish. You see also the sky, right? But as also, of course, if I would start creating a new level just completely from scratch and everything is completely empty here, and I just drag a cube or like a plane and just scale this up so you can actually see it if I have also a light there. So basically I take here rectangular light and I do the lighting here, of course, in real time. Then you can see how it looks like, right? Of course, I could start now shading and so on, but I just don't do that. But you see immediately it's pretty cool. I can take this light and move it around, and you see how I can do my lighting. And of course I can create all my glossy shaders and materials, and I can create super and fast like moods, you know, in a very simplified way. And I can also do it for the real. So we all know that. Now, the problem is when I basically change my settings from shader model 5, which is in Unreal by default. So this is shader model 5, PBR shader based models. Physical based rendering is here supported. So if I basically change now my shader model under settings and go here to preview rendering level, then you can clearly see it's by default in shader model 5. Yes, it's DirectX 11 and OpenGL 4.3 plus, it says. Also supports PS4, Xbox One. Of course, it supports PC games, but it doesn't Android. And when you see here, you can basically simulate the look, how it will look like on the Android-based system. And as we all know, the Oculus Quest runs on Android. So now watch this. As soon as I do this, basically everything is changing now, and it loads it into the preview mode. I'm assuming basically the whole code in the background is completely changing. You see also materials are being cached. I think that it's the software in the background starts to compile different shaders. And even if this is an empty scene, there's already like code and materials assigned even to the basics, because even to this clay render here, to this clay color that is assigned as a standard to this primitive object, it kind of has a code on it, right? So, boom, now you see here, there are also in the package basically like so many other shaders, and it's just compiling it so that you can work with it immediately. But as you can see, the ES3.1 preview is on, and now things are at this point pitch black. I mean, I'm in the lit mode. And if I go now into unlit mode, then you see my objects are, of course, here. I can also switch to wireframes. So we have definitely all these objects here. But as I noted before, you can clearly see I can also change now my lighting intensity. It doesn't really matter. You cannot have an actual physical based real-time preview. Instead, what I have to do as soon as I say, like, I basically click on ES3.1 and get out of it again, I realize I need to build it. Basically, I need to bake it. And this build or this baking is like, as you know from offline retracers, you basically can change here the quality. I'm using for that already the Lightmesh GPU for baking and not just the Lightmesh CPU. And I can change this to the lowest quality. And of course, I can click not play, but build. And basically what it does, you will see it then immediately here on the shadows. It creates now, the swarm is basically launching. That's an external program, which you can, so Unreal is launching it here, and you can open it here and you'll see then the progress. So it says 100% is done, and now you can see this is the fast baked preview, right, mode. So even, I mean, you can see it here, but like this is clearly baked. And if I would look now at my, I mean, we can see it on the shadows here, at my frame rate, we have the maximum frame rate. Anyways, so this is nothing new, but watch this. Now if you switch on ES3.1, Now you can see the quality and exactly the output what I achieve, or with this bake, what I would have achieved pushing this cube and the plane into the Quest, or like for Android, right? Now, as we can see on a standard like preview, it looks kind of similar, but I can tell you, for instance, if you use then different shaders, it looks completely different, right? The quality, of course, here can be increased. There is, for example, you can increase here and override the light map. So I have only 64 pixels. I could go up to 1024. And then if you always also, and this is kind of like this weird stuff, is you have to get out from the ES3 preview. You have to go back to the standard thing and then just build again. And basically now it renders again. And if you make any changes in the lights or whatever, it always goes through this process until the render was done. And yes, as you can see, when I increase then the quality and also the preview quality, so to speak, you see here now the shadow gets sharper and nicer. And we're getting to a point where I can say, yeah, first success. I mean, I do understand now what I have to do, and I can start doing the lighting process here. You can clearly see here in real time because the other shadow is already baked. And here this is intersecting with this one. And I also want to make sure I'm still recording, not that I do this for nothing. And then, of course, basically I can go in and make this blue here, and then I can do another bake. And I can say now I have a blue light here. Maybe I put it here and say like build. But as you can see, it is, sure, people might say, well, you don't need to build all the time. I mean, you can stay in real-time retracing, and then once you have a look established, what you like, you create a super quick preview build. And then you switch over to ES3, right, and see how it looks there. But I have to say, it's kind of like really tedious. So now you see the bake here. And of course, depending on the quality settings of your bake, it also changes here a little bit, as you can see, because the diffuse thing here changed a little bit. Also, if you take the plane here in real time, it says then immediately, of course, the shadow immediately pops or is removed. And it says immediately, hey, you need to rebuild the lighting because basically you moved an object, right? But what I also want to demonstrate is real quick here, if I switch then with the blue light also into my ES3 model, I just feel like it's a really tedious process if I want to get this into the Quest. And I was wondering if, there are not better ways. So now I can click it and see. You can clearly also see like exposure values and settings are different. And so if I want to have this material, the cube white, as you can see here, this is shader model 5, and if I bake it here, and this is then the look on the Quest, then I can definitely say it's also darker. That means I would also need to kind of consider always like somehow an exposure control setting or something like this. And this is usually done with the post-process volume. But for real time in VR, it's actually really, really bad to use a post-process volume because it eats immediately 50%. It doesn't matter. I was running tests, like 50% of all the power. It's crazy. And it's also recommended by Oculus developers to not use any post-process volume. Maybe what I didn't check yet is because, of course, you can control here also the exposure settings, and you can go in and then I can say, you know what, I just cranked this up. And if you go then into the build, in the preview, I think you have to rebuild. If I do this like, let's 3 here, and I rebuild this here, let's see what it does. It's really like very important to experiment. You also see the post-process volume here has in a standard like a bloom effect. I mean, I can turn this all off. This is all not a problem. I just wait until it's built just to see something. And of course, if you have a simple scene like 2 lights like this and you have a preview lighting, then the build is done relatively quick. But still, as you can see, then, you know, if you want to have a preview in ES3, then this is how it looks right now. And then it's really tedious to hit kind of like a point where, you know, like, this is probably it. Maybe it's then 2, you know. The fun part is, this is what I can already see, is if it's in shader model 5 with an exposure compensation from 2, it is overexposed, and I rebuild it here. It almost seems like I don't have to rebuild it once it's built, because the post-process volume seems to do everything on top of it, right? I was just wondering if I use the post-process volume when I'm baking, if it's then also baking brighter texture maps, or if it doesn't, that's probably also worth a test. I didn't test it yet. But as you can see, so lighting is basically built is complete. We can also check it here, it's completely done. And yeah, so if I check this now, I can clearly say in shader model 5, the cube is very white. I would say it's like overexposed a little bit, but if I click in ES3.1, this looks probably not bad. But we can also see like burnout values, which I don't have here, as you can clearly see. And I don't know from where this is coming from. Maybe you don't have like the same, you know, bit depth or something like this. It's kind of really strange, I have to say so, because you see like those crazy burnout values, it really matters. I mean, I have to say, when you use this in the Quest, it really matters. I mean, lighting is so important. It's just one of those super important things that I always say, sure, you want to make sure that the lighting you set up or you do or you generate, whatever you do, it just looks really cool, right? I mean, because if you have better lighting and better graphics, this is what, you know, makes the experience so much better. So I can run here real quick another test, just make this maybe a red light here, doesn't matter. And you know, in the preview, of course, here, if you click it, if you don't build it, you don't see it. That means you only can rely at the beginning on this one here. And then once this is done, you go and build again. But one thing I realize, I think, in this workflow is for sure that, in my opinion, it's probably then really establishing shaders and the lighting in the shader model 5. And probably once you established it, you then need to just tweak it with the post-process volume. But like I said, we can clearly see here how soft and smooth that is. We don't have any burnouts. And if I go now into the lighting, we see clearly those crazy rings, you know. And that might be because of the small bake, or like I said, of the Quest limitations. Because I'm using basically here no texture maps. That means you see the GI that is calculated, or the baking light information, the light mass, so to speak. You see literally everything. And again, I mean, most likely if you increase this to 496, and you see as soon as you override that, and you change it, it's turning into pitch black because it lost immediately the information. You know, that's kind of like also very, very strong if you have that. And of course, I will try and check also if there are somehow any other settings. You know, use area shadows. That's very important, for instance, if we have stationary lights, because the area shadows are the best shadows you can actually get. And so I'm using 3 stationary lights. You're limited to 4 until they are intersecting. But that would be, for instance, also like then another build, like a test. How can you achieve really nice and crisp shadows? Not a problem in shader model 5. It looks fantastic. I mean, I have to say so, even with more complex lighting. But you can already see here I cranked up the light mass on the ground plane to 4096 so that you get basically the maximum resolution for the light map that is produced for the plane. And it takes much longer already. But still, I'm using the GPU light mass that is so much faster than the CPU light mass. I highly recommend using that. And that comes not with the regular build, okay? So because lots of people ask me, this is an add-on. This is something what you have to install additional. And I will put this also in a description below where you can download it. And then you can also change the quality settings. But as you can see here, I think, and this is also normal. So when the swarm is built, it always goes through this process. So you can see here on the bottom, it starts exporting the scene. The light mass is starting. Now you see actually how it's being processed through my GPU, not my CPU. Okay, I'm using, by the way, an RTX 2080 from NVIDIA. But it's really cool, at least, that you can see this render process, right? Kind of like, as you could say, like render process. And then you see also the different colors, and it takes then also here at the very end, or like at the where it says like the building the lighting is 98% done. Don't get fooled by this number because it has to go through all these steps and this process here. And you can basically follow the graphic and it shows you very clearly how long it takes. But when you noticed, I changed it from 1K or 1024 in the pixel resolution to 4K, and it takes so much longer, right? For baking. For sure, at the end for the performance, if you have built a level that is amazing and you put so much work and efforts into it, and you want to hit, of course, also the maximum performance in the game, because you want to have as less draw calls as possible, then for sure you go ahead and, for my final games, then I bake everything in high-end resolution to get the maximum performance, but also the maximum quality in the graphics. Anyways, I could wait here, but I also interrupt this here real quick, and then I change this here and just make maybe the half 248. Maybe we can see it then, and just basically say stop the build, and now I can redo it again. My thought is also sharing this process with anybody else who is in, if you know me already, like my fattybull.com website, then I'm like a big fan. I'm like big in look development, shader creation, lighting, rendering, cinematography, using the sequencer. And I just love it to create the nicest experience you can get. And graphics, is just like a visual element. It's just the best element you have here as a tool. So why not maximize it, right? And that is basically my goal. But as you can see as well, Shader Model 5 works pretty well, but I'm having some difficulties understanding how you can avoid like color burnouts or like light burnouts, overexposure, underexposure, whatever, that you have a workflow that allows you basically to say, look, whatever I create with Shader Model 5 and I build it here looks pretty much, I know it will not be 100% the same. I know it's nearly impossible to match it to 99%, right? But if I'm getting like 90% close, I'm super happy. And as you can see, it's tough. It's really rough. I will run then later a test to see like if I can achieve with the super high resolution, basically, like a clean result. And this is basically my question to everyone out there. If you know a way how to get this really, really clean, and what else I would need to, tweak or Besides actually, of course, I can, and this is clearly, right, the lighting quality, I can set it up to production instead of having it in on preview, or at least I can go medium. And you can change, of course, the light mass, the light map resolution. That is very, very important, and override every single map, whatever you have in your game. But my question out there is just basically if there is anything else, if you have any other opportunities, any other features I am missing right now, and I can see, because the development process for the Quest is, for me, like it's so cool. I mean, I'm such a big fan from the Oculus Quest, and so if there is any other nice and easy way that people have been already established, then it would be fantastic if you would like to share that with me. Yeah, and as you can see, the process now is in the lighting build, not the preview anymore. Then it's already the medium, and it takes significantly already longer. But, you know, that's my question to everyone else. Of course, the best would be, if I interrupt this here, if I would have ES3.1 preview in real time, but I get it, that's not gonna happening. It's for sure not happening right now. But for example, when we look at those curves, right? I don't know if this is related also to different gamma curves, right? Because of course you could go into the post-process volume. I also want to show that you have the global gamma curves, and you could also change here stuff. But as we can see, you know, if you change here the gamma in the ES3.1, it's all baked. It doesn't do anything, nothing. I mean, you could go down here, you can change the gamma 0.456. It's like, you know, in old school renders, people always said you have to go linear with 2.2. Don't get confused here, everything stays at 1. But as you can see, post-process volume doesn't do anything once it's baked, right? Because it's baked in terms of the preview model of the ES3.1. And also, of course, if I would go into my exposure settings, now I'm curious. Yes, this is still changing it because it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do, it seems to be, with the baking information of, you know, the baked light information that is on these objects captured in those texture maps, or light maps, so to speak. But anyways, of course, what's very important is if I go then into the play mode, I cannot have a post-process volume. So this post-process volume is something I would need to delete before I build the game, and also deploying to the Quest, right? So, and if I delete this post-process volume, then, you know, now I have actually no more control over it. This is actually funny. I can undo it. But I could then say, you know what, then maybe I adjust the lighting and you delete it and it's kind of stuck and burned in. That would be kind of cool. Nope. I see. So as you can see, when you have here the post-process volume and you adjust the lighting in ES3.1, it's kind of like the exposure of your camera. Then you can clearly see I can go up here. Let's do this. I overexpose it now and put it on 3 that you clearly can see it. It's overexposed, right? Now if I click the play button, now I would play in the game. This is game mode, right? Could be also then the VR mode, doesn't really matter. But it simulates now the game itself. And you can also see immediately here the FPS. And of course I hit my maximum because, so to speak, it's pre-baked. And the post-process volume in the PC doesn't really matter. But it matters a lot on the Android mobile device. It eats up immediately 60 frames per second. So I was running tests, deployed it with the post-process volume, especially VR Quest, of course. And I was immediately, when I had 90 frames per second, it dropped to 45, no matter what. So if the post-process volume is on, I can tell you it kills it. So you're losing hardcore performance and it kills every game. So you gotta have to remove it. There is no other way. And again, when you switch between those two models, you see this extreme difference in the curves, right? In the contrast. And that's kind of like the point where I'm lost. So if I delete the post-process volume, you see it again, boom, it gets back to the original bake. And as you can see, it's much darker than, actually, no, it isn't. That's funny now. And that is maybe a good experiment. You know why? Because that basically means it takes the actual information from its core render values. That's now really interesting. That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, success. See, even by trying to show a problem, I figured maybe something out here. This is very important, is because now we have no post-process volume that influenced it. Yeah, it is brighter. I mean, we have to say so. The exposure values, however it is compiled, it is different. But it seems like really just the biggest difference is like the contrast. Sorry, the contrast in the values. And maybe one thing I wanted to show is, of course, if you create a material, there might be now a lot of other limitations or changes, because this is also a clay model, right? And it has, for instance, here, take a constant 3 vector color information and just say, like, let's do this kind of pink here, right? So, and what I also want to do is I just make it super reflective and have my roughness down at 1 and just say specularity at 1. So I have a glossy plastic, super high glossy plastic shader here, boom, done. And yeah, we can rename this and just say like glossy plastic, Mr. Pink, whatever. Look at me, now I type even German. So see, here we go. And now let's see what's going to happen if you assign this in shader model 5. You see the reflection here from the light, it's so sharp, right? Maybe I bring this a little bit down so it's not as sharp, and you see the reflections then a little bit more blurry. You see here, now it's much more blurry. And you can also check this by bringing in a sphere and assigning that sphere, and same shader. So here we go. Now we see what is actually going on in shader model 5. And now, of course, what we have to do is we have to build the lighting again. And what I do also here, again, I always want to play instead of developing, right? Is preview, so it goes faster, and then I click build. You know, when I click build, it usually builds everything, because if you move geometry, it goes through everything. But if you have a static scene and you know you don't move anything anymore, you honestly just need to build, so to speak, the lighting to basically see what's going on. I just kind of like to do that. And of course, it totally makes sense if you start like testing look development. I would go with the lowest settings, like what we had at the very beginning. If I have here the plane, I would for sure change my light mask back. Maybe not 64, maybe like 248 or something like this. And then anyways, when you do this, because like still had this going on and made a change, I click build, and now it should go then much quicker and faster too. But of course, all those shadows, it's done. You see, I mean, this is like then super fast preview. But okay, who cares? You can bake it later much nicer. And now let's see how that shader behaves. And as you can see, this kind of worries me because there is no reflections, right? So that means the standard Unreal shader network works, of course, for PC, but it's quite obvious to see if you use those shaders and you create shaders in here, then you have this problem that, obviously this isn't going to work because you can't see any reflections on it. And there should be actually also information about it. It should be a glossy material. It should look glossy. And that would be also a question how Quest developers are actually dealing with that, you know, because reflections are very expensive, of course, I get that, but it pimps it, right? It pimps the ride, so to speak. It pimps the graphics. And for specific metal pieces or whatever, of course, I need that. And if I don't have that, I mean, it's a huge difference, right? I mean, we can clearly see here, it makes a huge difference between the glossiness, shader model 5, and again, it's under settings, and you can go here, preview rendering level, and shader model 5 is by default versus the Android ES3.1. So again, would be super cool how you guys, if somebody knows like how you create then glossy shaders if you don't use it this way, or if you don't use a standard material from within Unreal, how do you create it, right? Specifically for the Quest. So that is my question. And yeah, and also I hope maybe if you have never been testing this, it's good to see for you as well what I am documenting here, and you know, just to show also what challenges I have actually to go through right now. But I really want to find a workflow that is just the best workflow you can actually get. I'm a huge fan of like workflow and pipeline development because it's a huge time saver. And especially if you want to develop a level and you have a specific mood and you feel like, wow, this is epic, this is awesome, right? Then you also want to have the same look deployed on all other devices, especially mobile devices, right? And if everything else looks completely different, then oops, you gotta have a problem here, right? So anyways, that's about it. It was pretty long. Sorry for that, because, you know, guys, my tendency, I like to talk a lot, but I also like to visualize and show. You know, basically boundaries are also like, yeah, how can we do this, you know? So thanks for watching, and if you have any ideas, any comments, any hints, any suggestions, please feel free to comment. I really appreciate every little help I get from you guys as well all the time. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask those questions. And yeah, happy pixeling, and talk to you later, and take care. Bye bye.